Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to welcome you to the second in our student webinar series. And this one is about being wise online. And it's going to be for 1 hour, so from 11 till 12. And so it's a short enough session, but actually we will be doing a longer session with Tony as part of an empowerment program in November, which you might keep an eye out for. And this webinar series is replacing what we normally have as student days. We normally have one in Dublin and one outside of Dublin, and we're having 5 webinars to replace those this year. So there's one other webinar on tomorrow on public speaking, and there's 2 more webinars on next week, one on creative writing and one on tips for digital learning. So you might like to take part in those as well. And just before I introduce Tony is our speaker, Tony Daly, and before I introduce him, I'd just like to do a few little housekeeping rules. So, our rules is very severe, but rules. There's just, first of all, we'd like you, if you can, to put on your camera, if you don't mind. If for any, and I suppose just to kind of have you connected to the session. Now, I think we're putting most of you on mute just for the moment. But Tony doesn't actually mind being interrupted as he goes along. You know, if there's something you'd like to check, and what you might do to take part, there's kind of 2 ways. You can put something in the chat, and I'll be looking out for those messages. And the chat is at the bottom of your. If you're looking and you can't see any little notes at the bottom, there's mute, stopping your video, security, participants, and that. But there's a chat function there, and you can type in there, and no bother if you don't want to do that. There's another way of taking part, which is the reactions button, and you can click on that and raise your hand, and I'll keep an eye out for those and come to you then if you have a question, and we'll unmute you then during it. And Tony's going to talk for maybe 15-20 minutes, and then we'll have an open kind of session. Now, if there's lots of questions in between, that's okay. Tony will talk you through that. The other thing is we're keen. We're keen to have you take part in this, you know, to talk and ask questions. So please feel free to do that. And just bear in mind, you know, not to talk too much if you're, you know, there might be other people who want to come in as well. And the other thing I want to just give you a little bit of context why we're doing this session. We work with we've NALA student subcommittee, and we'd be very aware of some of the difficulties that students have, and indeed all the general population have as well, to do with managing information and even getting online. You know, so it's fantastic that there are some people bringing perhaps students who might have been able to get on the line themselves to this session. So thanks for that. And just to see how webinars works, it takes quite a while to get online and things like that. So, but we're also very aware that it's really hard to manage information. And NALA had been working with Tony's the organization Tony works for, which is 80/20, and we've been working to make a tutors resource there. And then we had money left over from the Student Development Fund last year, and we created the publication Digital Matters that some of you may have seen, and that's available. And it's got really loads of helpful stuff about using social media and getting the most out of your phone, and also being wise online. And so this topic, we ran a webinar last year on this topic as well with Tony, and so we're delighted to have him back doing this webinar, there's great interest in this topic. So without further ado, I think Aoife, I've covered everything there. I don't know if there's anything I've missed out on. Yeah. You can give me a shout, yeah?
Yeah, no, that's good, Margaret, thank you.
Okay, great. Listen, thanks. Aoife's my colleague who's helping out on the techie side, letting everybody in and all that. So thank you for that, Aoife. But Tony, without further ado, I'd welcome you to the webinar, and thank you very much for coming. And I look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
I phased out, but I'm back. So good morning, everybody. Thanks for your patience, and delighted to be involved with everyone this morning. We have a nice big group from north to south to east to west. There's a lot of interest and there's a lot of appetite to talk about these issues. I'm not sure we're going to cover them all in a 1 hour session, but that's okay. I think the important bit is to give it a good go. So just to say thanks to Margaret and to Aoife and to everyone in ALA. We're delighted to partner once again on this topic on digital matters and matters related to digital education. I think starting out by saying it's, you know, as a group that are interested in learning and learning about these issues, you know, I'm constantly learning about them as well, like we all are. Some of it is through trial and error, some of it is by discovery, some of it is through getting it wrong. Sometimes we get it right as well, but the key thing is to admit that we're giving it a good go and we're willing to actually invest time and thought and energy to trying things out. I think being holding back from engaging and using some of these digital technologies that we have around us can be quite overwhelming sometimes. So I think the fact that you're willing to give things a go is actually really important. As everything is digitized, and I think the fact that we're using Zoom and we're doing a national gathering on this topic reflects that. So anyway, thank you for taking that leap. And as Margaret said, I have a presentation. It's a mix of interjection. It's a mix of stop and ask questions. It also has elements that you know, we're inviting you to respond to in, you know, if you want to raise your hand, as Margaret said, or you want to add some text or type a message. It's your time. It's not just a one-way traffic for me. And I'd like to suggest that this is more of a horizontal space rather than me at the front and everybody in listening mode. I think it's much more of a dialogue. And it's important that you know that, because your own experiences of using digital tools, social media tools, Zooms and so on, means you have a lot of learning that you may not always get a chance to acknowledge. So I would like to invite everybody to be part of acknowledging that as part of what we're doing. It's not just a case of, I'm not going to tell you how to use Twitter properly, because I'll probably get it wrong, as I sometimes do. But this is about acknowledging that there's actually a lot of experience around us, and leaning on others and asking questions and shouldering people around you is part of that, of that exercise. It isn't just about individuals and what you do, it's about what we do. And I think that's important as an idea, so that you develop confidence and try things out and share and reflect on how you're doing, okay? And it isn't a small point, it's actually quite an important one. Some would have us believe that education on using digital technology is just about individuals and how you might write a post or a tweet or a post on Facebook, but it's actually about taking stock of it and asking questions and reflecting on it with others. So I'm mentioning that right from the start, because that's actually really important. It's certainly in our work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with our, you know, I have a presentation that is prepared, but I'm also happy to work through it and as I say, slow down as we go, as we need to. So the session today, as we know, is about critical thinking to do with being online. Digital technology isn't just about the internet, but it's about our connection to lots of technology that supports access to information. So, you know, your phones would be included in that, and accessing things off your phones as well, you know, through apps, through browsers, and not just computers. So the general approach is about safeguarding and thinking about how we might engage with some of those. And you know, certainly as a principle, we like to suggest pressing the pause button and slowing down rather than just retweeting and sharing things straight away. You know, developing that as a starting point is important. That we give ourselves a chance to press the pause button as part of thinking about our footprint online. In terms of starting off, I just wanted to start off by saying that your trust in the media and, you know, public survey work around news information in recent years, certainly in the last 5 years, has changed. And the volume of what's known as fake news or misinformation, and a combination of misinformation and disinformation, these are terms we're going to get into fairly soon, has affected our trust in media outlets. The information we have here is relating to a pan-European survey of citizens across the EU about what you perceive as the problems around news information. We know that the news that we read may be informed or at least affected by lots of information that is bad information at the same time.
What happens now is it turns sideways.
So you certainly wanted to at least put this up front. As you can see, fake news is a danger to democracy was a term that was asked of people. Is it a danger to our societies? Do we think accessing information is a right? Responding to the question of, do we feel there is a problem with information that we access, was admitted in this pan-European survey. So
Tony, you don't mind me jumping in there? I suppose just what that came out with was that 83% said that fake news is a danger to democracy. So nearly eight and just over 8 out of 10 people said that fake news is a danger to democracy. That's it, isn't it?
It is, yes. And that key idea, or that key statistic that was found, is really important for us to take as a reflection piece in terms of it's not just individuals, but how it might affect our democracy means it affects our trust in institutions, trust in government, trust in information relating to how our society works, and trust in each other. So it has a broader impact than just whether something is believed or not believed in terms of news. And the danger to democracy is one that isn't for us to just ignore, but there is a fight back, there is a response we can do and have, and we need to, our sense of ourselves with regards to all of this information and this reality of 83%, or as Margaret said, 8 in 10 people think that fake news is problematic for our countries, is something that we have to grapple with. And I think the session today is a part of that contribution. And I think your participation and in this exercise is one way that you're able to push back against that reality. I just wanted to mention that from the start, that we're starting from it's a very challenging time for information and accessing information online. So therefore, we need to develop a sense of ourselves and how we can respond as we're going along. So in terms of the time that we have today, you can see from the session, proposing some background information and context. I'm going to run through a few examples that have to do with social media posts, and I suspect there'll be interruptions, and I'll try not to spend too long on these, but to give you some examples of things that are going on. And then we're going to move into showing how things are produced. So, the news is created, but things to do with fake news are created as well. And we want to give you an opportunity to see some of that in action, certainly to have a sense of how easy it is to create these things in order for you to perhaps be a bit more critical of what you might find when it's coming from places that you don't know or are unfamiliar with. So whether it's from a news agency that you're familiar with, or a news site or a reliable source, if it's coming from somewhere else, then you should be, your feelers and your radars and your ability to slow it down and ask, well, where's it really coming from and what are they really doing, is something we want you to be encouraged to do. And lastly, we want for you to take away a strong sense of agency and a sense of self and what can I do. And there's things that you can do that are very important to break away from what might be the very bubbles that contain us with regards to information flow. So social media apps and social media outlets they have algorithms, and there's coding to do with containing information in perhaps some of your own circles or certain information bubbles. So to do with certain kinds of news. And this is about managing where you access information from and some good practice that might support a broader sense of ideas and accessing information. So yeah, we want you to have a strong takeaway at the end, okay? And feel free to obviously make suggestions as we go along. Starting out, we wanted to ask, what you do online. We could have done a big poll at the start, and there's a number of these icons to do with Twitter or Facebook or TikTok, or do you use Skype or WhatsApp or YouTube? Feel free to put stuff into the text box there as I'm going along to answer some of that question. But the number of things that you might use isn't usually one of these apps. There'd be a number of them, and your comfort zone about how much you might use one or a little bit of another, or maybe just one for news and one that I would comment on with my friends and my family or colleagues, is worth admitting that there's lots of different apps that we're active with, and you have some that you use more than others. That's fine too. But we just wanted to ask what kind of ones, as almost like a baseline or a starting point, what ones do you use? So if you haven't, people haven't written into the text box, but I think that's fine.
Sorry, Tony, they haven't written in, but for Tony, would people unmute and just maybe give a little sense of what you use? Would it be Facebook, or would it be Twitter, or would it be YouTube mostly, or WhatsApp? Just to get a little sense from those that are present.
Hiya guys, my name is Patricia. I use WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger. I'm on Pinterest, Facebook, and Instagram.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for sharing that. Great.
No bother.
Anyone else?
Kevin here.
Kevin, how are you doing?
I'm on WhatsApp, Facebook, I'm on Twitter, and that's about it.
Great. Listen, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for that.
Anyone else want to share there, just to give us a wee sense?
Hi, I'm Margaret, Max, and I'm in the clan in National Network here.
Great.
Sorry, basic education, sorry. And I just want to share that I use Facebook and Instagram, Snapchat only.
Very good.
And sometimes I'm very cautious because all my profile is private, but sometimes I won't understand, what to do, especially with hackers or scam, people, or like being safe online. So I'm just cautious sometimes. That's why I'm just wanting to say this.
Thanks, that's great. And there's a good few comments there, Tony, in the chat. Just Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. Let me see, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, WhatsApp, Instagram, Twitter. Sorry. So there's a good few. Yeah.
I would actually use Facebook, that green one. I used to use Twitter. I use YouTube a lot actually for music. But you know something? Those Facebook and Twitter, I'm kind of actually gone off of them, because you see the same people actually nearly on Facebook nearly every day, and I wouldn't share such as really important information, if you know what I mean.
Thomas, that gives, people are a little wary sometimes of sharing information, of course. And just, Tony, there's a good few responses there in the chat as well. People saying
I can see
TikTok.
all of those.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, there's
so people saying TikTok.
WhatsApp, there's Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Instagram, Messenger, also a banking app, TikTok, Messenger, WhatsApp, Instagram, Twitter. There's loads of them there. So thanks everybody for firing in some of those just for the purposes of this exercise. Don't worry, we're not going to hold on to that information and in some way use it again, for something else. It was merely for this exercise, really, to get a sense of where people are coming at it from. So you're very active on a lot of these elements already. And what we wanted to do is to just introduce at least the sense that that there's lots of things that you're doing already, and with regards to social media and some of these digital technologies, and some important questions that we need to know around their uses. Is understanding how it can be tracked. So what are the kinds of things that they're gathering? I imagine when we walk into a shop, we probably are less likely to be tracked in the same way when we're purchasing something or using a service or perhaps catching the bus. So it is unusual compared to some of the other things that we do in life, compared to digital services, that the amount of information they gather and how that becomes the product that gets sold. So I think some of the information that gets tracked, and I have it up on the slide, includes your location, how much money did you spend, where you live, what's said about you, what did you search for, what did you say in your email, what's the time of your activity, and the websites you visit. Those are some of the examples of things that get tracked. Another key question is, how is it collected? So knowing how these different social media apps collect information and where they get that from, and whether we're even aware of that, or whether we're actually told that, these are important questions for us to check. When you click on, for example, an app store to download an app onto your phone, it usually asks for all kinds of permission. And this examples of things that it collects. It tracks your location. It will, is an important element, and there's lots of others. But being able to ask questions about what it's trying to do are important. So we wanted to show you that they're constantly collecting stuff about us, collecting our comments, cookies on websites to see where we end up going. So it follows the trail of all the websites that we click on. So information we post, what is our purchasing history? So we log on to websites, it gathers that information as well, or it can do. The third one is, what is it used for? So again, the intention of the actual digital technology that is in use, the app, what is it used for, is an important question that we don't always get to ask. So what we want from it may not always be the same things that they want from us. So it is marketed in a particular way. So what is it used for, this information? They gather it to find out marketing information about selling products. So it may be to create influence on us, so marketing products and advertising. Digital reputation, it might be used as part of that. Behavioral economics, I mean, the list of items is there, but behavioral economics, so to support certain kinds of actions that we might take versus others. So for example, people might be familiar with seeing a little prompt that appears on either Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or others that are like a little ad from the government suggesting people consider awareness to do with vaccines or COVID-19, new information. So for example, it could be a news alert. So they're encouraging us to stay familiar with information with regards to a specific incident. Emergency situations as well. Sometimes information might pop up or appear as well to encourage us to check in, to say, so that friends and family know that we're okay. You may have seen those before. So again, this is, it can be used sometimes for information and alerting others. But you can see from the list that there's invasive, it can be used for bad uses as well. So to do with our privacy, sometimes it's used to hack information, to develop cyber attacks, or to inserting spyware, which is to do with looking at all of our actions and keystrokes and things like that. I'm not going to say all of these happen at the same time. They don't. But this is a broad list for us to be aware of in terms of what it might get used for. And this is social media apps have different degrees and different parts of these elements that I think it would be good for us to even have a look at. To do with our safeguarding our own privacy means we're now able to ask any of these companies, what information do you store on us? So even as an exercise in curiosity, I would encourage people to check out what they have on you. So you can actually put in a request to them, usually from within the app in the settings itself, and they can then send that to you, and you can then remove that, delete parts of it, or ask to be forgotten. You could ask, I want to delete that information as well. So these are things that you can do around the actual information that's stored on you. Sorry, Margaret. Yep.
I was just thinking that might be a very hard process to do, is it? Have you ever done it? I'd say that's tricky, to actually know where to do it and how to do it. It sounds a bit difficult, but I'm only guessing.
It does, but it used to be more difficult than it is, because companies were told, as part of privacy and safeguarding our digital privacy and digital protection, exactly, the GDPR, that piece of legislation that has rolled out across the EU, means that companies have to be better at responding to our requests and they have to make those requests easier to access and to find, rather than buried on a website on a page that is hidden away from everyone.
Okay,
So
thanks.
within the app settings, usually you'd find it like a little cog, like a wheel and a cog in the settings of an app. You should be able to find in your account settings in there to put a request in, if you were interested. But if not, there's videos on those and we can share more information. But even exploring that possibility, I think, is part of our own literacy of figuring things out. And I think I would encourage you to even just go in those menus and have a look around, because you develop a sense of it when you're doing that as well. And I think it's well worth doing that. In terms of some of the questions about what am I reading online, I use terms like disinformation and misinformation. And just to state the differences between them, disinformation usually has to do with things that are produced to misinform. So it's falsification, it's things that are produced knowingly. So if you're creating something to share around that is incorrect or trying to cause harm, that's known as disinformation. Misinformation, as you can see from the slide, is about somebody sharing that on. It may be taken out of context, but you're sharing it on. You're not the producer, you're a carrier or someone who shares it. That's the difference between them in terms of terminology. That is well worth looking at, because I know we throw around the terms quite a lot in different ways without always slowing down and looking at what's the difference. Disinformation, it gets called fake news. I know Orla Ryan of the journal.ie, she ended up calling it, she says she's not a big fan of the word fake news. She used the word inconvenient news. So it's, sometimes it's news that we're not always entirely happy with. Some people might find it that it's, rather than calling it fake news, it's inconvenient to us. And I think that idea of inconvenience is something I'm going to come back to as we're going along. But just to look at the differences between fact and opinion, the fact would be, as you can see, a piece of true information, but something that gets measured rather than just a reflection on something. It's something that can be calculated and measured. So I just wanted to put that up as a starting point, that language is important, and it is good to slow down and put up these words and ask questions about them to explore them further. And I would encourage you to do the same. In terms of critical thinking, what we mean by critical thinking as part of this exercise today is, again, slowing down to ask questions. So can we ask questions about something that we encounter? Are we able to form an opinion about it? It is, and this is about us not just taking something and believing it straight away, but actually slowing down and looking at the different elements that are included in it and making sense of it. Are we able to do that? What is behind what we're reading? And are we able to arrive at a position about it? Can we evaluate it? The word evaluate is there as well on screen. But what I'm asking is, are you able to make up your own mind about it? How does it feel in terms of your interpretation or your sense of it? This exercise today is about supporting you to move from a position of understanding to one that you evaluate and make your own mind up about. And I would encourage that journey throughout. Whenever you're encountering information, even through your social media feeds, you arriving at a position that you're comfortable with is about you taking ownership of it, rather than just sharing it or just circulating it or going, yep, okay, maybe, and just passing it on. This is about you getting a little bit closer to what it is that you're reading and analyzing. So that's what critical thinking is about, you traveling on that journey to arrive at a position. And that's what we're encouraging as well that you consider. In terms of, so why do we need critical thinking skills? I think some of it has to do with all the information that we've encountered today. Already talking about social media feeds and social media devices or apps. And there's a number of ways to do that in terms of questioning, analyzing and evaluating information. So it is about navigating it. It is about asking questions about it. Is there a bias? What does bias mean? What might it look like? Do I have a bias as a white male? you know, as a white man, what's my bias? You know, I'm from Wexford, so I may even have a regional bias as well.
Tony,
sorry,
Tony,
Margaret,
do you mind if I just jump in? You know that word bias. It's one of those words you mightn't be sure what it is. I maybe everybody knows it now, so sorry if you do. No offense, but it's just, you know, the way you hear about it, but you mightn't be sure what it means. I think, if I might jump in, I think it means that you've set ideas maybe before about something. You've set ideas that you think you know kind of the topic, would it be? Or could you explain that just a little bit more so we'd know what it is?
Yep, that's a good stopping point. You know, your bias would be, you know, your lived experience, and your formed opinion would be based on lots of things that you've encountered as you've grown and on your journey as individuals. And, you know, for example, from my position as a white male, I'm informed by lots of things to do with my own characteristics and my own encounters, whether it's my social circles or whether it's to do with experiences that are new to me, and whether I've had a chance to push my own sense of myself. My bias would be that I don't have the full experience of somebody who is different from me. So therefore, I might be limited in my understanding of their experiences. So that's a very theoretical way of saying that I'm not somebody from France, or I'm not somebody who has the experiences of somebody from Paris, even living in the suburbs, or perhaps even from Cape Town that has a different kind of experience to mine. So my bias is limited by geography. It's also limited based on equality issues like my gender. You know, it has to do with my age as well. So it's different characteristics that other people have that are different from me. Bias isn't necessarily a negative term, by the way. When I say it openly, I'm encouraging challenge. I'm encouraging to learn and grow my sense of others' experiences. So this is about me willing to either reinforce the perspectives that I have, or whether I'm looking to learn and grow with others as well. So I'm not sure that entirely answers your question of what is bias, but I'm limited in what I've experienced, and in that limitation, it carries biases.
Thomas has his hand up there.
Hello, Tony. I want to ask you, if I was to walk up to you all of a sudden and say that you were a biased person, what way would you take that?
I'm a biased person, Thomas. I would entirely agree. You know, I would say I do have lots of biases. You know, that I do want a better world from the one that we're currently in. That's absolutely a bias that I have. That I have that I'm a white male with a beard, you know, and short hair carries its own particular cultural biases as well. But I would say that while I have a bias, I'm willing to talk about that. You know, so what do you mean by bias, and what do I mean are important discussions, or what do you mean, or what do you see are the biases that I have? So have an opportunity to discuss that is actually really important, because we might go somewhere different in our own limitations or our own biases that we have. We're contained by our experiences, and being open to learning, like what we're doing today, is part of extending that. So my bias changes based on my experiences and the people I meet. So my world view potentially can grow a little bit more based on getting to meet people who are new communities in Ireland. Or perhaps it has to do with not just reading one or two news sites. I may end up reading a South African newspaper, or perhaps a French newspaper that gets translated into English, or maybe a blog, or I follow social influencers from Nigeria to do with music and culture. My answer to the question is, well, do you know anyone else, who's really, do you know any other good music artists from West Africa that I can check out? So there may be a way to challenge my bias that I'm open to. But admitting that we have bias is actually a really important starting point if we're going to have a sense of others as well as ourselves. That might be my longer answer, Tom. So I hope that's helpful.
Yes.
I would admit it openly as opposed to being overly defensive. It's very difficult
it's probably useful to think what your biases are, because we all have biases, isn't that it?
Yes. I think you could look at that in many ways, couldn't you? Really, I think bias actually comes with an age, I think. I mean, a person with, we'll say a person at 85 years of age would have more knowledge than a person actually, we'll say, with 25 years of age, you know.
Yeah, but it also depends on what topic. You know, an older person may not be so familiar with technology, for example. I'm not trying to stereotype too much, but like, you know, say if they've never, don't have that experience of, like, if you think now, just as an example, the children nowadays have never grown up without technology. So they're in a very different space than say my generation, you know, like, so we all have little and different experiences of life. And I suppose it's maybe just, yeah, just to echo, I suppose, what Tony is saying, I can get that everybody has biases. I think it's, yeah. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you there, Tony, sorry.
Can I say
Yes.
to Tony, actually, you were saying something there actually about fake news, so you were. And I mean, how do you educate a person with reading and writing problems to fake news?
Well, part of the session today is to be open to learning. So being open to extending our comfort zones is really important. I think part of the answer to your question, Thomas, is one of these questions that we all struggle with, which is it isn't just about the right piece of information that might in some way change someone's view or you're looking to persuade them. I think it has to do with, and there's all kinds of studies and research around answering this question, that we come preloaded with lots of values in terms of that we develop over the course of our lifetimes. And engaging with those values is actually part of what is one of the key drivers of challenging a position that someone might have, rather than just a piece of information with a fact on it. When it comes to election time, it isn't about a new piece of information that might move you in one way or another to do with candidates that you're interested in. It may have to do with the values that you have, the values they might have, and how that is expressed in terms of their interests usually becomes really important. So I believe that it's you can reinforce people to stay in their own bubble in terms of pushback and kind of accusing them of, well, you're only following fake news, and you know, you can do that. Whether you're successful in moving their position or them reviewing what it is that they had followed or shared may not be as successful by accusing them. I would suggest being supportive in correcting that, or supportive in challenging that. Is you're more likely to arrive at a stronger position, or at least a better outcome, rather than just an accusation. I think the politics of the last number of years have pushed us into these very different positions that end up clashing against each other, and we don't always have that middle ground to work through whether something is right or wrong, or up or down, or allow us to interrogate it or to question it. Creating spaces to question things, I think, is actually really important in terms of answering your question. So I would encourage you to do that, and feel free to use it as a space of discovery for you both. It isn't just about one person is right. I think there's discovery for everybody involved. What I wanted to say, the slide that's up now is, you know, these sunsets are to die for, is very much to do with some of that values base that we draw from. You know, human rights values, you underwrite a lot of our ways of being, and asking questions like what's important to us is something that we can't leave outside of this process. As you can see from the Shepherd Fairy, the artist who had done this poster, this has to do with fossil fuels, it has to do with climate change and a sustainable future. What does that mean for, you know, what might that mean? When we engage in questions around you know, critical reflections on the news and information, what's important to us and our values are actually very important with regards to reading things and evaluating things. It isn't just about, as I say, a piece of the nugget of a fact or one piece of information. A lifetime of caring and empathy and social justice awareness, or caring about issues and defending values, does inform our evaluation of things. So this is about asking questions that we know are underwriting us as people, but we don't always admit necessarily when we're doing our fact checking or checking up information. Values actually are very important, you know, and I say that because we feel certain ways about headlines. We have feelings when we read a meme or we read an image with some text on it and it gets a reaction from us. Those reactions are based on things like this, our values, you know, and drawing from those gives us that sense of ourselves. Sorry, Margaret, you look like you're going to say something.
Sorry. Tony, values are like what you think is important.
Yes.
Yeah. Like, so it could be something like, I don't know, that we're kind to each other, or that you don't hurt anybody. Like, there can be very simple values. They're not necessarily very complicated, I guess. Is that, you know, if you think about your values, I suppose, there are things like that, are they? You know,
yes.
Is that what you mean by values, sort of roughly, like?
100%. So your sense of caring for others, should things be the same for everyone or different, you know, and kindness as well. I mean, these are part of our values that we develop and are socialized as we grow. So yes, I wanted to admit that before we even touch a piece of news or look at a social media post. You know, where is society going and why is that important? Or what kind of society do we want? Are questions that we must reflect on or give ourselves a chance to ask in terms of how we then talk about information and interrogate what we're seeing in front of us. It's part of our understanding that is part of the skill set and part of the tools that we have in terms of reading information. And by that I also mean, of course, apps and social media as well. So I wanted to admit that up front. You know, I know that we're down to about 15 minutes left in our session, so we don't have a huge amount of time. But you know, when we slow down and flatten, you know, the information that's used now, or at least terms that are used, as you can see from this particular a graphic from the World Health Organization, when we try and flatten a curve of misinformation, you know, to do with bad information that's out there, it can have an effect for lots of other people that we encounter as well. So it isn't the impact of us adopting more critical positions or being more critical of the things that we encounter and find can have a wide impact, the more of us that are doing it. That's all I wanted to say with regards to this particular slide. I think it's actually really important to say that we do carry, there is an impact that goes wider than just us when we do those things. Margaret? I'm just conscious, if you don't mind, I'll read it out just in case, just for so people can get it kind of quickly. So the first one, there's this person at the very start where there's the one dot. So the information came from somebody, and then the next person didn't send a rumor to that group chat. So one person didn't, and then all those other people are kind of in light gray because they didn't get the information. And then the further down, the person that did send it, somebody else further down checked the facts, and then didn't send it. And then, so sorry, again, apologies if everybody's got this very quickly, but I just thought I'd read it out. This person got news from trusted sources, and then they shared the trusted sources stuff, but they didn't, you know, they shared that back down. And then, you know, this person asked, how do you know that that's true? So it's those kind of questions as you go along, you know, that can change then all the information that people at the end get. Does that make sense? And it has a chain reaction. And I think you're involved in chain reactions is an important part of your sense of self in this web of information that gets shared in all the different outlets that are the apps you use. Sorry, yes, I can see someone has their hand up. Yeah.
Can I say to you there, Tony, that looks like there's nobody is actually taking responsible for what they have written. Would that be right?
Well, let's just say that this is a creative illustration of both the potential for change, but also of practice that's going on. You know, we don't always have a chance to slow down and ask the questions. And I think part of it, Thomas, is that, you know, the way that apps have developed now and the way news feeds operate is that it's very quick. Information is coming at us quickly, you know, so we're always encouraged to keep scrolling, clicking and scrolling. And what we're encouraging you to do is to pause and slow it down a bit, whether you're doing it as an individual or as a group. And asking questions allows us to slow that down. And questions are critically important if we're to change the reality behind a curve like this. So my answer is yes, but ...
Can I actually say to you, if I was writing a note, I would think twice actually before I would send any of those type of notes. If I was going to send a note, it'd be only about it. So I think I'd be actually safe actually there. You know, if a person, if you had 10 people actually that was wishing you a happy birthday, well, I would just put in one note, thank you for all those people who has got in contact. That would be I would put up real information like what you've been actually talking about there this morning, because I think that's looking for trouble.
Yeah, well, thanks for that, Thomas. I know our learning of how we've learned over time how much we can put into these apps, and I think our learning journey continues when we decide to produce less information or to post less information, and that's to do with judgment and experience that allows us to make those decisions. And I think sometimes we learn through failure, and we learn through other people's experiences as well, and this is about being open to that journey. So it sounds like you've gone on one, and I think the point you've actually made there is an important one for reflection, because when it comes to media literacy, you've heard that language, you've heard those terms. What it actually means is about understanding news production, how news is made. So that half of it is about understanding things. The other half is about producing of things. So media literacy is about how we produce, not just how they produce. So when you write a social media post, when you put up a photograph, when you share something on, that's to do with production as well. Yes. So to encourage you to be more critical of your production, not to stop altogether, because media literacy is about both of those things. And you developing more confidence and practice around the production side that you're comfortable and informed and happy with is part of a session like today. Just to say that outright, that production is part of media literacy.
Thank you. Tony, sorry, yeah. Do you mind, Kevin had a question there. He wanted to ask something.
Yeah, just one thing about, you know, it really depends on how you want to interpret the points that your man is making, because you're not going to believe everything that he's going to say. You're going to pick individual points out of what he's going to say. You're not going to believe 100%. It's just like if you get two newspapers and you put two newspapers down in a table and you read the two newspapers, right? One newspaper will give you a certain point of view. The other newspaper will give you other point of view. So it depends on what you want to take out of the two of them, what you're going to believe yourself. And if you're that gullible to believe everything that somebody writes on the internet, you deserve to get what you get, really. Do you understand what I mean?
Well, you see, part of it's a challenging point you've raised, and I know we're down to the window. I won't get through everything that I've prepared for today, but I think these points are actually these points are very important. When you bought a newspaper 30 years ago, 25 years ago, 40 years ago, you knew your sense of who's producing the news, the kind of newspaper it is it one that is based on taking different political leanings, or is it more conservative, or the word liberal might be used as well, but you have a sense of the kind of editorial wheelhouse or editorial standards that the kind of information might be informed by. So the Daily Telegraph, you won't be surprised to know that it's a more conservative newspaper from a British politics perspective. The Daily Mail in Ireland may give you a different kind of perspective, just like the Sun might as well. With the rise of digital technology and the internet, we don't always have a sense of those editorial perspectives that might be included. So that's a very important point that gets made, and I wanted to reinforce that perspective. You've mentioned there, Kevin, about if people deserve what they get. We don't always know what's behind some of these the producers of information now, and that's why developing a canvas, or at least a bunch of news sites that are reliable, institutional news is something I might say, and trusting certain kinds of news or trusting the news means you're informed by how they make it and how they're supported and funded and the kinds of perspectives you might get from it. So the fact that you're reading two newspapers is actually really good practice. You're trying out different perspectives on a topic to develop You know, I have a slide further along with a giant kernel on it from it, like a corn kernel, around the perspective of developing the kernel of truth. You know, in the middle of those two newspapers and all that information, you will find the kernel of truth that is behind it. So that the key idea that's behind it. Very often, that kernel of truth is informed by lots of things, including bad information or perspectives as well, and not just something that is measurable, that is, that you can measure as a fact. And this is part of experience with trying out multiple sources of information to develop that sense of reading. What I wanted to show you here is very quickly, is literally on that point. Wikipedia. Many people may use Wikipedia or have encountered it or seen it. And I wanted to ask the question, who produces more content about the continent of Africa? So to do with production, right? So do people across Africa produce more information about Africa than people based in the Netherlands, than in Holland? Some research was done on this a few years ago by the Oxford Internet Institute. And as you can tell, based on the color red on this map, that more information gets produced from the Netherlands, from Holland, than the entire continent of Africa put together. And so the reason why I'm putting this up.
Tony, will you show us where the Netherlands is? Just
excuse me.
Just with your cursor, maybe.
You know
the way
Netherlands is.
I know
can you see it
it's there, but it's.
Are you able to see it from my cursor there? Yeah.
Actually, no, it's not. It's not going on.
Okay.
But it's the dark one to the right of.
It's to the right-hand side of the United Kingdom. So
And
to the right-hand side of the United Kingdom. So the same color as Ireland and the UK.
Thanks, Tony. Sorry, yeah.
The Netherlands. So things can carry a bias depending on who's producing it. So that Africans are not writing as much information about their own continent, their own lives, their own culture and experiences than people outside of Africa, the continent of Africa, is an important reflection point, because a lot of us view, or at least it is seen, that that Wikipedia is an encyclopedia that is neutral and everyone has access to, and it's like a global commons of information and knowledge. The answer is, this graph will tell us that answer cannot be true. So our sense of who's producing what, as your question, Kevin, rightly put, it develops over time, and having an awareness to ask that question is actually very important if we're to fully get or fully trust information. I just wanted to put that up as an example. We're down to 3 more minutes. What I might do is, I know I've added various things as we've gone along. Politicians accidentally share things as well. Here's a case of misinformation from the president of France to do with the Amazon forest, and a tweet that was reshared based on a photograph of an Amazon fire from 2019. So this was subsequently found out. So his intention was good, to share information about the Amazon and the fires that were going on, but actually the image that he had shared was incorrect. It was from a previous time rather than at that moment in the summer of 2019. Separately, I wanted to show a particular tweet from the former president of the US, Donald Trump, who talked about, back in 2012, had talked about climate change as a conspiracy. It's a concept that was created by the Chinese in order to make US manufacturing non-competitive. And at that time, we can ask what was going on with that tweet. There was a claim made and there was no evidence to back it up, but it was presented like a piece of factual information. So the kinds of questions we might ask about, it was as a tweet, but something like that gets shared into lots of other mediums as well, and you'd see that on Facebook, and someone might take a screen capture of it and share it in there. It happens. So we just wanted to suggest that even from these 2 high-level sources, in terms of elected politicians, they get it wrong too. We're into the last 2 minutes of the session. Sorry, yes, Thomas, yeah.
I don't think anyone took Donald Trump too seriously, though. I know I didn't, and I wouldn't believe anything that would come out of the man's mouth.
A lot of people did, though, Thomas.
This exactly, and this is the thing, Thomas, is that like it or lump it, that while Donald Trump was elected as president and carries a huge amount of favor. And whether you believe him or not, nearly 50% of the American electorate had supported positions he had taken. Whether they were aware of all of the positions or not, I think is irrelevant, or whether it all aligns up with facts or not, is a challenge when people support others without necessarily having access to this criticality. But that rather than saying that's a judgment, as I say, bubbles of information might enclose you to encountering information in a closed bubble, rather than actually reading beyond that or hearing other views outside of what might be just someone's Twitter feed. It's healthy to get different sources of information, just like it's important to exercise your brain and exercise your body in different ways. I think we need to be more reflexive of that in terms of how we encounter information. I'm conscious we're literally on the mark here at
if you don't mind,
so Margaret,
Tony,
go for it.
Patricia, sorry, Patricia Horan has a question there. She's her hand up. I know it's very close to the time.
Sorry, Tony. Hi, Tony. It's not really a question. I just want to say thanks a million. I could listen to you all day talk, and I've taken quite a few points from what you've said. I'm actually a student in Mary Mackia College in Limerick, and I just find this absolutely fascinating. Like I said, I could listen to you all day, and I've highlighted the fact that you said questions are critical. I agree 100%. I think that was a brilliant point to make, and that media literacy is all about the comprehension of things and the production of things, developing your own confidence in the product of it. I'm going to revert back to this in my future studies. I just think it was very good. It's very informative, and I'm so glad that I came on today. So it wasn't really a question, more of a compliment.
Okay, well, thanks for that, Patricia.
No
I appreciate that. And I'd say I got about 50% covered of what I planned on doing today. And there was a whole slew of things that we were to show you, including, if I can suggest to people to check it out, a video by an old Guardian, the Guardian newspaper had a video ad called Points of View.
How long is it, Tony?
It's 30 seconds long.
I could just flick it. Would you mind?
If you'd like me to show to you, I can do that now.
Are people okay with that? Maybe give a wee sense there. And actually, of course, it's no problem if people do have to go, but I think it might be worth showing if it's that.
That would be very good.
Show it briefly.
Sorry, Tony, before we go to the video, is there any possibility of accessing your slides or your presentation? Sorry, this is Patricia again.
Yeah, I can give a more detailed onward list of references included and places to check out, and fact checkers and websites and so on to have a look at. But yes, I can absolutely do that. And there's loads of education materials included for onward teaching as well, and learning actually about creating your own headlines and how you can do that. And there's websites that allow you to do that. So yeah, I'll include that in the slides that I circulate.
I hope you will come back to us again, and I hope the next hour you do will be a lot longer than this hour.
Great, Thomas.
Well, thanks for
that,
Thomas.
I'm gonna mute everybody just so we can show this video for a second there.
Okay, so I'm going to do it there.
An event seen from one point of view gives one impression. Seen from another point of view, it gives...
Tony, can you just increase the volume on it a little bit if possible? Sorry.
No problem. I'll do that again.
No worries. It might be possibly to do with your earphones they're in. Maybe.
Hang on there 1 second.
Thank you.
Will... Here we go.
An event seen from one point of view gives one impression. Seen from another point of view, it gives quite a different impression. But it's only when you get the whole picture you can fully understand what's going on.
Oh, yes.
So, in conclusion...
That's great. That worked. Yeah, that worked. That's great. Thanks, Tony.
In conclusion, developing points of view is critical for us in how we encounter information in what we do in our day-to-day. It's 30 seconds of an ad. It's 30 seconds of an ad, but it goes quite far for us in supporting, broadening your position and your worldview. Read information from different sources. Check things out And don't just judge a book by its cover. And that's important to do with things that we encounter online, whether that's a post, an image, and things that seem like they're quite topical and emotional. Slow it down and give yourself that chance to just double check it, or just ask a question about it. And if somebody shares it and they were unable to slow it down, support them to slow it down as well, rather than calling them out. Because actually, if you're going to change that, if you're going to flatten the infodemic curve, as the World Health Organization has said, it requires us to do it together rather than just calling someone out and thinking the job is done. You know, we need to, we learn from failure as well, and I think it's important that we can travel together when we're doing that. So these are just some.
That's a very good point. That point's very good about. That point's very good, Tony, about saying, like, you might say, instead of saying that's wrong, you might say, like, I see it differently, and then, or I see it from a different point of view, and then tell which point is, and then try and work it that way, I suppose.
Yeah,
but
and being kind online means is important as well as part of this practice. We can be very anonymous. So if we are to support the values front that we know people carry as well, it is about being kinder online and finding ways to do that. And I've loads of links that I can share with you in terms of examples of how people have done that. And I'm sure people on this session have ideas themselves. So it is actually very good to share information about that. Stop Funding Hate is a great campaign to check out about how people have done that in one example. Stop Funding Hate. And how it's been encouraged, if you're to check out one example. But sorry, I'm conscious I'm over time. Everyone has to go, so go for it, Margaret. Yeah.
There's lots of comments coming in to say thank you very much, and that it was a very informative session. So thank you very much, Tony. I think there was loads in it, and I know you didn't get through the whole lot, but what you covered was excellent, and thank you very much. I also want to refer people to, there's a nice workbook. We produced the Digital Matters workbook, which is a little section on being wise online. And people might like to check that out, and it's on NALA's website. Aoife has put the link up there in the comments page if you want to click that. And I'd just like to tell you about the other webinars we have coming up. There's one tomorrow on public speaking with Rory McKiernan, who's very good at that topic. And also next week, we've an author, Ciara Geraghty, doing a webinar on creative writing. And we've Bray Adult Literacy Centre tutors and students there who are going to do tips on digital learning. So all I want to say before I end is thank you very much to all of you participants for coming. Really appreciate you coming. And thanks again, Tony. Thank you very much for your input. All right.